Hello, how are we all on this slightly gloomy January afternoon? It is cold out, and I keep seeing on weather forecasts because I'm British that there's going to be like a -8 forecast next week. Not looking forward to that. But anyway, let's stop talking about the weather. We have far more exciting subjects to talk about this afternoon in today's members meetup. So today I am talking all about people who we don't think have sex, but do. Now, there's a few reasons as to why this particular topic is one that I'm discussing today. So first of all, over the last few months, I have come into contact with and done work with and met lots of different people who initially, when you kind of if you saw a written description of them on paper or you were told about them, you would not think that they were sexual beings due to perhaps their age or limitations they were facing, or how these individuals have live essentially. And it really has kind of opened my eyes into other people around us, and also another thing I want to do is stop being so judgmental and also forming preconceived ideas. Now sometimes it's hard not to, because that's how we navigate the world. We see things and we interpret them, and we use our knowledge and our experiences to suss out situations and people. But I think sometimes, we are all guilty of this, seeing somebody and making assumptions based on their age or their physical appearance, um, and also our relationship to them as well, because this is another topic which I'm going to dive into today as well. And I think sometimes we need to stop and we need to accept and understand that just because somebody is a wheelchair user, or somebody has a disability, or somebody who is much older than ourselves, that doesn't mean they can't have sex, they don't want to have sex. And this is something that I wanted to talk about today. Now, another reason I wanted to talk about this topic is that a few weeks ago, I was talking to one of my friends who is, she's about my age, and she has a grown up, well, an older teenage son. And her older teenage son and I was a girlfriend. And I get on with this lady pretty well. We're pretty similar in kind of how we view the world. She's not a swinger, but she's quite an open-minded woman. Anyway, we get on. We have a lot of good banter between us and things. And we were talking about she was talking about like her relationship with her son, because they're quite close. Anyway, this son has a girlfriend, and the son brought the girlfriend back into the house. We all know why that was. And this lady, she could not deal with it, even though they are consenting adults. They are over the age of 16. They weren't doing anything wrong legally. But this lady, unfortunately, she was in a bit of a state, and when she started talking to me about it, I tried really hard to be calm and be rational, but also understanding and sympathetic. But at the same time, I was kind of like, well, you have to accept it, as people, as human beings. The boy's in the prime of his life, essentially. And, that's what he wants to do. And he's going to do it. And he's in a relationship, and it's very normal. And she could not accept it. And I tried really hard and I was supportive, but at the same time, I found it quite difficult. And she said, well, you're not a mother. And like, granted, I'm not a mother, but then a few days later, now I'm not a mother, okay? I'm not a mother to human babies. Um, bear with me on this. But a few days after I had this conversation with her, I was sat right here in this very chair at the computer, working away, and I had, because the kittens climb up your legs and they use you as a climbing frame, I put a fleece blanket, like a fluffy blanket, over my legs as I'm working, because I'm an old woman, to keep me warm. Anyway, so I'm sat there with the blanket on, kittens are like playing around the bottom of the blanket, and then the little girl kitten climbs up onto me, curls up, falls asleep on my lap. Lovely, purring, very nice, very cute. And then little boy kitten climbs up, and we all know where this is going. Little boy kitten climbs up and cuddles onto her, kind of, as they do. And then I'm typing away like this, and then I hear like the little girl kitten kind of screaming a bit, and I look down, I glance down, and I was like, I looked at her, I was like, "Oh, you okay?" And then I looked down again because she carried on making noise, and I could see the little boy kitten was trying to be rude with her, and I pulled him off her, and his cat dick was out, and I was absolutely horrified. Like my response, and I feel a little bit embarrassed about saying this, but I burst into tears when I saw that. Even though, like, I I talk about, human nature, I talk about animal biology, I talk about, sexual nature and how animals don't always differentiate between, family members and people they want to have sex with, and it's kind of normal, and that, people, when young mammals reach a certain age, they get sexually mature, and they want to fuck, and their doing is natural. And I understand that and I accept that. But it was happening under my roof. It was happening on my lap. It was happening with me being present. And I was just like absolutely horrified that they would do that. Although I wasn't surprised by him, I was horrified he would do that. And I was really upset. And then I kind of gave myself a bit of a talking to, but it kind of all tied into like it wasn't the physical act. It was more the fact that she was crying out and I was there and I felt guilty for not being able to stop it. Which sounds ridiculous. I mean, I did stop it. There was no like cat contact, but his thought was there. But anyway, that was my experience. No, I'm not a mother. No, I cannot relate in all ways, and I would never try to. But that was my experience because you all know, well, I hope you all know that my cats are my little babies and I love and adore them. But anyway, um, let's get on to today's topic. So, do you remember how old you were when you realized that in order for you to come into existence, your parents must have had sex? It's a realization we've all had. It's sometimes a shocking realization, and I think pretty much everybody on this planet has had that. Oh my God, that's disgusting thought. Nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to acknowledge it. And I think you have to reach probably age of like mid-30s before you go, oh, okay, that's cool. But even some people are not able to do that. So why is it that even when we are grown-up adults, we find it hard to accept that maybe our parents have had sex? And also, why is it that we can't accept that? Because when you when you realize that your parents have had sex and produced you, they may just have had sex before then and even after then. And it's a really uncomfortable thought. And why is that? And why is it that when our minds go to places that we think of, or when our minds go to people who we think of as non-sexual people, why do we feel awkward about it? Why should people not be able to have sex? Why should people be seen as non-sexy? Why is that? Now, a few of the kind of groups that we often think of is older people, and I think this refers to like however old you are. It's subjective because when I was 16, I thought people who were 30 and 40 were old. Oh, how times change. Now I'm 35 and I think people who are 80 are old. When I get to 60 or 70, I will think people who are 90 are old. And I think everyone's like that. Um, so older people is one that we kind of don't associate with having sex. We think it's disgusting. And another one, which is kind of very close to home, is our siblings. I'm not going to talk explicitly about my own siblings, but I know this is something which, when I've mentioned this to people, or when people kind of told me about their siblings or about different dynamics, or their take on their relationship, and I've gone, oh yeah, that's because they're probably into X, Y, and Z, and they fucking hate it when I do that. But once you start learning about the world of sex and dynamics and how people like to get down, and you become very acute to spotting these things, such as dom sub relationships or certain kinks people are into, you're like, oh, okay, I see that in you. But anyway, our siblings is another one which is very uncomfortable. Disabled people, this is one which I hold my hands up and I say, like before, like maybe 6 months ago, I did not view disabled people as sexual beings, and that's really horrible of me. And I think like I'm now so grateful to have my eyes completely opened, and now I'm doing lots of work to completely change that view. Because if I was like that, and I pride myself on being an open-minded and inclusive person, and I feel quite ashamed to admit that, then I'm wondering how many other people out there also think that, you know? So disabled people. And when I talk about disabled, I mean physical disability, but also disabilities like being deaf or being hard of sight loss as well, because that's another area which I've had experience with people within the, you know, in the swing community. I've met lots of people, not lots, but a number of people who face that as well. Another one which I want to talk about is this one is yeah, our children. Okay, I'm going to put that out there. Obviously not my cat children, although it did happen to my cat children, and I cannot deal with that. But grown-up children, obviously. Is that something which people? Is it still the same as how we process it as you know on the receiving end as being the children of the adults who are having sex? If you do have children, how do you view it? Was there a turning point when you realized, you know, there's something you can do about it? Your children are flourishing and making their own relationships and making their own way in the world. You have to accept it. And that's a question I want to ask people who do have children. What's that like for you? Is it a hard thing to accept? Is there, you know, is it easier for mothers than it is for fathers? Is it easier for fathers with sons? Is it easier for mothers with daughters? How is it? I think I'm pretty lucky in that my own mother has all she's very much like me, very much to the point, pragmatic, open-minded, opinionated, but not afraid to talk about topics either. And she's always not encouraged me to be kind of open about things, but she's never really judged. And if she has judged, she's never let those opinions kind of, you know, come out of her mouth. Um, so that is one good thing. Obviously, she doesn't know the extent of what it is I get up to, and I would never explicitly tell her, but also she has always created that kind of safe space for if I wanted to talk about things. And she's used to work as a nurse years ago, so she's very comfortable talking about anatomy and biology, and she's very matter of fact. So that is a good thing, I suppose. Whether she's had that same approach with my other siblings, I don't know, but that's just my own personal take on it. So why is it, you know, why is it that we feel so awkward? Why do we feel ashamed of failing to recognize other people have sex lives? And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I think this is only talking from personal experience. I haven't done an awful lot of kind of research into this. I hold my hands up and say that. But I think for a lot of people, we base our realities on the people around us. And if you only move in certain circles where you're all, you know, of a certain age and all able-bodied people, the people who you meet and date are, you know, able-bodied people of a certain age, then they're the only people who you really have to base your experiences on. And I also think how people, and this comes from working with less able-bodied people, how they are treated by carers, by people who work with them and work for them, is that sometimes they are kind of treated not as lesser individuals, but they're kind of handled with kid gloves almost. And they're kind of like not thought of in that way. Not that a carer should think of somebody in a wheelchair as in a sexual way, but it's kind of like almost a little bit patronizing. So they never really make that connection that, oh, well, yeah, maybe he would like to go on dates, and oh yeah, you're looking at that dating app, or you know, having conversations about, oh, these are the people who you're currently looking at dating and things like that. It's just kind of they don't really make that connection. Um, and I think sometimes the world that we live in, because we do kind of disabled people, less able-bodied people, older people are misrepresented in society. When was the last time you saw a wheelchair user advertising something sexy. You hardly ever see it. And when brands do it, they make quite a lot of noise about it. Yes, there are campaigns that you may see in magazines or you may see, on billboards and stuff where they do feature people who are amputees or wheelchair users or suffering with different conditions, or should I say living with different conditions? You're not really meant to say suffering now. Living with different conditions or from different kind of walks of life or different ages, but it's kind of like definitely not the norm, and it is kind of unusual still to see. So I think that is partly to blame as well, because we've all grown up in a world where there's a certain aesthetic. Um, Another reason I think that we don't often, especially within the swinger lifestyle community, the reason that we don't often associate people, these types of people, uh, we don't associate them with sexiness and certainly swing lifestyle is because a lot of clubs and events and parties, the organizers have no idea that these people exist. I've only ever really been to a few events. There's one club I know of which does have wheelchair access, and there's a few other places or other clubs which I've kind of sussed out and found that they could potentially, have wheelchair access because they are being hosted in hotels, or they're all on ground floors, or they have lifts and things. But that's not because the event organizers have made sure that's in place. That's just chance. So again, I think within the swinger lifestyle community, there's, a whole group of people who are being completely missed out because we don't associate swinging with wheelchair users. We don't associate it with people who are deaf. We don't associate it with couples where one person is blind. But why wouldn't they want to get involved? Why shouldn't they get involved? Very often people associate the swing lifestyle with younger people or couples who are in like their 40s, 50s. And the reality is it appeals to people of all ages. I remember going to a club in Manchester and there was a couple in there and they were maybe in their 80s, and they started coming to this club when they were kind of in their 40s and 50s, and they'd had great experiences and they kept coming, excuse the pun, they kept coming back to the club time and time again. But when they got to that age, although they didn't want to physically have sex with other people or get down to it themselves, they enjoyed the social so much, and they enjoyed the atmosphere, and they enjoyed putting on their nice outfits and going to the club and enjoying it. Why shouldn't they be part of the lifestyle just because our minds don't go there? There's no reason why they shouldn't. And I think once you start kind of opening your eyes and realizing there's loads of different people out there, all of whom have the right to be sexy, I think it's can be quite a revelation, really. Also, one thing I've found when I was using dating apps is that again, a lot of people are kind of, let's take your atypical dating app, let's take Bumble dating app. People who are wheelchair users or are people who you don't think as atypically sexy, they're not really featured on the app. Now, is this because they're looking elsewhere and they think that other users wouldn't be interested in them? Is it because the app kind of not not discriminates them, but is it because they don't show up in certain features? Is it because they don't show up on deal with the algorithm? I don't know. But I mean, I used to live in London and I used to have a very, very wide net that I used to cast out essentially. There's millions of people. And I don't think I ever connected with anybody who was, or saw anybody who was a wheelchair user. Is it that they were hiding that from their profiles? Maybe. I don't know. Is it that they didn't like me and I wasn't being shown to them? I don't know. Is it that they are, as I said, all looking in other places? I don't know. When I have spoken to disabled swingers, they have said that, there are disabled dating apps and there are websites and things that they can go on and kind of use to meet other people. But in my mind, why can't everybody be included in the same place? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. And I think going back to the topic of why is it we feel awkward about people who are kind of close to us having sex. I mean, I haven't really got an answer for that. I think it's just a topic which is quite interesting. Is it because we are so far removed, these like modern humans are so far removed from how we naturally used to be, that now we see it as something which is weird and taboo and a subject that we can't talk about? Because if you imagine when we were living as a large family group, which is more natural for us to live as a large social group, we would witness our family members engaging in sexual activities with other males. I'm talking about kind of females in a group. We would witness our mothers, our sisters, our cousins, our aunts engaging in sexual acts with other males. We'd see that because that's how we used to live. Why is it then that nowadays some people can't accept that their siblings, their mothers, their aunts, their cousins are sexual beings? I'm not saying you should like pull up a chair and watch your siblings, but it's almost like we cannot accept that, or we don't want to admit it. We don't want to talk about it. I mean, everyone's different and everyone has different relationships with their siblings. And some people can talk about these things. Some people find it really awkward, but it's just on such a basic level that we find it hard to accept that they might even, get down to it. And it's so bizarre. And this episode was really more about asking more questions than giving you lots of answers. But it is a weird topic. And I think the next time you meet somebody who is fair bit older than you, or is perhaps an older person who is dating. This is another area that people don't often think of. Like, older people date. Grandparents are allowed to date. People who are over the age of 70 or 80 are allowed to fall in love and get married and date. Just because you become old, it doesn't mean that you no longer want connection. It doesn't mean that you no longer want intimacy, or that you deserve to have intimacy or deserve to have a sex life. Yes, women go through the menopause. Yes, men may not be as virile as they used to be, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve the chance to be intimate with somebody, whether it's their husband or wife or somebody who they've met. When I first started my coaching, I met somebody who was a widower, and he was a fair bit older than I am. And he'd had a whole lifetime with his wife. And it sounded like they had a fantastic relationship. They had kids and they had grandkids, and sadly, this lady had passed away. And one of the first questions he asked me was, because of my age, is there a place for me in the lifestyle? This gentleman, as I said, was a fair bit older than I am, and he was a granddad. And it would have been easy for me to, first of all, assume, why would you want sex? You're an old man. And nobody would find you attractive because you're an old man. And why should you get involved in lifestyle and all these things? And I think a younger, more naive, more judgmental version of me would have thought those things. But what really inspired me about this guy was that he knew he was not your atypical guy. He knew that his age, his, kind of not status, but the age he was at and kind of his status in society might go against him, but he still became one of my clients. He did all the right things. He attended parties. He went to hotel takeovers, and he immersed himself in the lifestyle. Because I listened, and because I said, yeah, you know what? Why the fuck not? If you want to do it, sir, you put on your best shirt and you go to that swingers club and you engage in conversation, because there is a place for you. And just because you are older, that does not mean you can't enjoy it. And he did. So that, in conclusion, is my members meetup on people who we don't think have sex but do. So the next time you see somebody who you don't think of as being a sexual being, just stop and think, yes, why can't they be? Why shouldn't they be? And maybe put yourself in their position for 1 minute and just think what it must be like to be somebody who society deems as unsexy, but they are, because why shouldn't they be? I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Um, I've really enjoyed talking about it. It's a topic which I do want to, I really enjoy talking about these taboo topics and these unusual topics. And it is something which I enjoy chatting about essentially. Tomorrow I am going live on TikTok for the first time. Well, kind of. I mean, I've done a few collaboration lives with Kate, but tomorrow I'm going live on TikTok. Thank you very much for inspiring me. Some of you beautiful people on here inspired me to go live on TikTok, and I really do appreciate that. Um, so thank you for giving me the kick up the arse that I needed to start doing that. Yeah, and I hope to see you all there. I shall see you all next time.